So I thought I'd make a video about this model ship. I'm working on this model ship. More about this. So for those, just 1 second, I've got to get some of the things that you don't ever get to see that I talk about. It's pretty fun, complicated, difficult, tedious, frustrating. Sometimes you get lucky like I did today and don't have to spend so much time. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but this is what it's supposed to look like. They give these mappings, and this is one of the parts, and I had to do it out of order because to get this done. You see, this is what it's supposed to look like. That's the actual fender that makes it pivot left and right at the bottom of the boat. And these are supposed to symbolize the clamps that they had during those days, and these bolts to actually hold the back fender to help pivot. I think that's to help pivot. I'm not sure exactly. I don't know if it's just made to, like, there's supposed to be, I guess, a taller stern that they could pivot and move while it's drifting to give you more curve, or it does something underneath the water as it paddles. It moves, obviously. I'm not sure exactly what that is. I don't know much about boats. But anyway, you get this piece right here. And in this piece, you get 3 of these little deals, 1, 2, and 3. As you can see, this also has 1, 2, and 3 on the opposite side, and these have 2 bolts, 1 bolt, and bolt. You actually have to get a nail, the little nails they give you, and you have to drill a hole. I drilled prior holes. Some people are, but I drilled prior holes because it's too difficult to actually do. The wood is strong, but it's more secure and more cleaner fit. So I pre-drill it, and then you have to cut the actual. They're all the same size, so they give you 6 of them, 3 on this side and then 3 on this side. 3 of them go one direction, 3 of them go the other direction, and then you have to. I don't know if you can see that there is actually a bolt there and a bolt there and a bolt there. There's not a bolt, but it's a little piece of metal rod. You have to cut it real tiny, and you have to fit it in this. It's very, very small. You have to fit it between there so that whenever it has both clamps, you have this clamp and you have this sort of metal wedge going this way and another metal wedge going this way, so it gives it rotation. So it gives it holds stability. It's like this, and it has the ability to turn. So that's the metal. That's the I don't even call it not the pulley, but the actual metal that holds it together, so it has the ability to move. And you get 3 nails. Obviously, 1, 2, and 3 does not get cut. So when it gets placed on your, and you can see it's pretty messy. I got a lot of glue, and it's not even dry. I still have put a lot of glue on there. So I'm gonna have to get these holes and put a nail through it. But I have to. It's supposed to go to the very back of this. So when it goes and sets in here, it'll set in something like this. Something like this. I don't know if you can see that. It may be a little bit out of measurement, but hopefully it's going to work. I'll have to probably pre-drill a little bit. Just a little bit, because it looks like it's not fitting. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so I'll probably have to drill or sand down just a tad bit just to even get that. I don't know if you can see that. Kind of difficult to see on that camera. It's not quite. You got about 2 millimeters. It's off. So you want this to go flat, 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 and then it's flat because it's perfectly measured on there, right? So I'm probably gonna have to sand that down just a tad bit, just to give it a couple of millimeters to fit in there. And then I put these nails in there, and I press this down, and I have to pre-drill the holes, and then I hammer it, the nails in there. So I don't pre-drill it all the way because the nails just fall out. So what I do is I pre-drill it. I try to do about halfway, and then I put the nail in there so that when it wedges in there, it has a tightness firm, so that the wood that's already in there still holds it together, and then I put glue so it's really on there, it stays on there. So these boats will last like for the next 700 years. Long after I'm dead, you'll see this on the Antique Roadshow that Hector built these boats. I used to watch a TV show, Antique Roadshow, and they have all these items that people find in attics, and they're worth millions of dollars. And you never know who they were, you know, until they take it to a professional and find out who actually, or if it's completely fraud. I've seen people get items from garage sales that were like $40 and turns out to be over $100,000, you know, and it's amazing. You know, you have all these. It's all these different items they have on an Antique Roadshow. I used to watch it with my brother Julian as well. They had like old liquor bottles, glass liquor bottles that were from so and so's cabinet or whatever, and they can't confirm it really was an authentic person that actually says it came from, and they can tell really well where it actually came from. But anyway, so just kind of making a quick video on this. It looks great. It came out really, really great. It looks kind of sketchy. It has a lot of glue, so I'm gonna have to probably apply glue all over this to add some. It's a sealant, and it's also a preservative. Helps preserve. So also, if there's any dings, it doesn't collect dust. So it does add a lot of protection to it. So that's what I do. So this turned out really great. Now I just got to wait for this to dry. That's some pretty blocks, but what do you call globs of glue. I had to use the rest of this glue, but I really wanted to stay. So you can see it's hard to be able to see it on camera to see that. But anyway, you won't actually see that. So when I place this on here, you actually think that there's just these metal things, and it's a lot more simpler, but it's not. There's actually a piece of metal in there, but it's not going to rotate, obviously, because it's glue. So I thought I'd make a video on that. I'm still working on this, having a lot of fun, but I still got to figure out how to refix this, because the damage is already kind of. I'm not sure exactly. I know that I couldn't get the actual foundation of the wood to go all the way curved like it's supposed to, so to get to that brown, so I had to fill it in with this wood, and then I had to put this, just inline it. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this bottom part. Just go ahead and plank it just so that it adds all this brownness to it, you know, like it's supposed to, all perfectly aligned. Like you can see how it's all brown, and then all of a sudden it's white, you know, and like, so I may have to go ahead and go over this. I haven't decided what that's going to look like yet, because I still have these other parts I have to add a frame to. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm working on. I'm finally glad I finally completed this entire thing. I completed it. Now I'm going to have to put the mast, and that's a whole nother book. That's a whole nother book that I have to work on. I mean, it's like when you put the mast in, you have just reading, like, and obviously, you know, I have to be creative because they mess all, you know, the whole thing up. So what I have to do with this, these are the instructions. These instructions, even when they're laid out to tell you, maybe all the instructions they ever gave me were bullshit. Excuse my words, but were just complete lies. But at least a couple of the model ships that I did buy in the beginning, I think were authentically the way that they sell them. You know, but anyway, I talk about, you know, these are pre-drilled little pulleys, and these little pulleys, sometimes they have 2 holes, sometimes they have 1, so that when you add these masts, they go into the boat, and then they go into the boat, and when it gets all mounted, the whole strings and everything, like they come down to the very bottom of the boat. I don't know if you can see that. That's at the very, very bottom of the sides of the boat. I talked about some of these missing parts, and then you have to, it's a whole complex part of it. But that's very tedious. It's very difficult to do even in the beginning. So when you add the strings to this, I don't know if you would be able to see because it shows you the ropes to all this, to many of the ropes of this. You can see some of this, and some of this is just decoration and just preference to make it challenging for modelers. But if you get an idea, like this is, I don't know if you can see all these arrows. Like you have to loop there, connect that pulley, go all the way down. This one goes all the way. I mean, this goes here, this goes here. You look, all these little lines are strings that tells you what you're supposed to do from a horizontal approach look at it to a vertical approach to it. I don't know, that's like the front approach to it to the very side approach to it, if you were looking at the strings. So you get an idea, and they're all numbered, and the numbers are specifically supposed to add up to some of these other numbers that kind of, so you have to keep flipping back the pages to understand what the numbers are and where they actually tie to. But since, and this is not even the last page either, but and look at that. So it gives you, these are blue and red. It goes, you have all this, it's supposed to go in all these strings. Like you'll have this string, it's supposed to go all the way through here, loop through here, go all the way across, loop through here, and then you have to look if there doesn't even go through a pulley, because you have to leave space there, because it looks like right here there's another string that goes there, pulley, wraps around this, goes all the way up and wraps around there. So you have to look very closely to what it's kind of telling you, and it gets very confusing to follow the lines to where it's all supposed to go, but they messed everything up. So because I already added the pieces, so now I got to be creative. So I got to work with whatever it is that whenever I set the mounts on there, I set them on there correctly as the first instruction did, but someone switched out the instructions, and now I got to figure out something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this on here. Boom. So just to give you a heads up, I'm going to go get the thing is that when you're building much of this, what happens is you actually don't have very much room. You don't have very much room, so that when you're trying to put your hands in there, like you have to be able to figure out how to squeeze your hands and use these to kind of put these little, because these holes are tiny, and these little pulleys, they're very, they end up drying and then they break. So you spend all this time building it, you haven't even started yet. Then you place it on there, you start putting the strings, and you don't know how you have to be very careful in measurements and how much glue or whatever, but sometimes they'll break on you, and then you have to redo the whole thing again. It takes like 20 minutes, 30 minutes just to get one of those, things deal and not make sloppy. Kind of hide your mistakes, but it's something like this. Like obviously, you can tell this is a forward mast, which is the very front, and see, this is already pre-made. I got the little deal on there, and it's supposed to go like that. Look, it's if I measured this correctly. Got this. Bam! Look at that. You can see that? Ta-da! See, it's supposed to stand like that. So when you have this just like that, it gives the illusion of what it would have been like ropes, like the threads. What the threads would have looked like, give the illusion of what the ropes would have looked like back then, where they have to tie them. and it just looks. I've always liked that. I've always liked the it gives a very realistic look. The thread, obviously, but then see, these are pre-holes and pre-rings, because whenever I set this, I have to attach it to all this mapping over here that's all screwed up. So anyway, so what I do is I have to, this is the forward mast, and this is the main mast. As you can see, one's larger, a little bit larger than the other one, and this is already pre-done. This one is already pre-done too. So with this is, all this is pre-done. All these little beads are supposed to mount to something on here, and it'll go up and down, up and all over the place. But since these beads have already been replaced with singles, like it told me, but now they're doubles over here, so I have to just be creative and kind of give an idea of what this function is going to be. It's not going to be anything close. It's going to be like a 50% or something like that, but it's still going to look decorative, because even when you make the model ship like it's supposed to, it's not going to be like it's, you know, like if you're on a real boat. Obviously nowadays the boats, they're not sailboats, and the sailboats have motors. And I don't know what the technology is right nowadays, but I just know that this is prehistoric. This is ancient. This is during the hard times, during the rough seas. The GPS got measured through the sun, and got measured to how far and how miles. This is why I added some compasses. These specific compasses they used to make back in those days. You could measure. You could take a look at this measurement and measure the reflection of the sun toward this beam, and how far it shot out to this like device, to the flat sea that you're on, is how many miles a destination of a target you'd be able to see. So if there was a target of a land that you were stranded out in the ocean, and you were trying to get to this land, and you're just floating, and you want to figure, and you had this device, you would be able to figure out with this device. I don't remember what it's called, but it's ancient. They used it like in the 1600s, or like during the Christopher Columbus days. And they can actually tell the measurement how many miles away an object is. I don't know how they figured it out, but they figured it out. And they used to use, that's how you use your GPS. You could, they could tell by the rotations of the sun and the moon where a lot of measurements of what part of the planet or the solar system and all kinds of different stuff to figure out your destinations in the ocean. I don't know anything about the ocean. So if I got stranded, I'd probably get eaten by the sharks. So anyway, this deal right here is the main mast. And obviously there's a lot in here that you see, and so when I'm building this, obviously there's going to be more drapes. There's 1, 2. This is already completed, but there's these drapes that are going to be like literally floating. They look like they'd be floating. And once these drapes, these sails get placed on there, then they have strings to go to. And you see this down here, all these bottoms, this is the floor deck. These floor decks, these numbers here are supposed to match a number to one of these numbers that tell you exactly what mount it's supposed to go to. I have to build the whole bottom deck to where it is on these little these little hooks, and so when I place all these items here on the deck, I'll know that once I loop this around or whatever, how many times I have to, and go through yada yada, and it's difficult, and I have to finally come down to sort of mount it, because the guys need to be able to unwrap the ropes and stuff and move the sail so it pivots, whatever. Obviously this is just a model ship. It tells me the numbers to match it to. So like this blue number, see, like you have like this 198 blue, and if you look right here, this is 198. So 198 and a 198 here tells you this is the main mast. After you completed this, tells you to go all the way down, and it doesn't actually tell you, it just points an arrow that's supposed to go down, so you don't actually know, but you have to be able to know the measurements, because you don't want to give too much and you don't want to have not enough, because the worst thing to do is better to have more. It's better to have extra than it to come short, because if you get short before you can actually get to the bottom or figure out how you're going to mount it, everything else behind it is going to be screwed up. So it's always better to have more than less in this situation. So, and obviously, you know, you have to preserve it. You only given so much string, and then you just run out. So this right here, once this is all done, like this is just one string, right? One rope if it was like a big one, right? If it was a big boat, comes all the way down, and it tells you the number it hooks onto. So this one will go to 198 to 198, and I have to look very detailed to what this is. And this right here tells me 188, so this would be second to the right of the corner. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes. 5 holes need to get drilled on this piece of wood, and then these little sticks like stick out like that much, and then I just wrap the rope around that once it comes down, and then that's where it gives the illusion, like the guys, if they're on the boats or we're on the sailing ships, right? They unharness it, give it some slack to catch the wind a little bit more. So you have to keep coming down. But since these ropes, since these little pulleys, they're changed them on me and they're doubles, that means that I only got one hole to go through. So all of them. I don't know if I have any room, if I even have any room for doubles anymore, even though it's like 10 doubles I have to put on there. But obviously I'm not going to be able to complete that. So what I'm going to have to do is figure out, okay, so how am I going to be decorative? How am I going to make this work a little bit to the understanding of this? So anyway, some people use, I haven't tried this method, but they use a honey wax. They use a certain kind of honey wax, which honey wax, or is it honey? Yeah, it's a honey wax, and you actually get the rope, not the rope, but you actually get the string, and then you just, it's like a bar soap, but it's like a bar, it looks like a bar soap, but it's a bar honey wax. And you just pull the string, and I couldn't figure this out, because when I saw the model ships inside the museums, and I see them like all elegantly made on the internet, the thread looks very looks very realistic, very clean, looks thorough. It's a piece of thread, right? And I was like, well, why does my thread look different than theirs? You know, I couldn't figure it out. Well, it's because they're using, and the wax helps preserve and give a little bit more clarity about where the thread is, so that when it gets completed, and it also obviously the thread has cotton, has a lot of hairs. After you touch it too many times, it just breaks off, and that's what happens. So when this to preserve the thread and give me a more realistic and clean, visible look, without the threads all poking all over the place, it's honey wax. It's a wax that that I've seen them do, and it gives a real clean, and it's actually easier to grab and actually easier to put in a little bit of holes in there, because it's very tedious work. So when you're doing all this, when you're doing all these threads and whatnot, I'm actually trying to go by this. I'm none of the boats, but maybe the Polaris is the only one, but the front part is the only part, because I did add my own element because it did into my brother. So that's the only boat that I did that to. So and so in this particular situation is also that when you're building it, this is what, when I'm building it, I'm not saying when you, but when me, I'm talking to myself. So when I'm building this thread, when I put the thread, I have to make sure that, like, this is going to be like, I think there's it's like 2 or 3. It's It's like 2 of them, they're going to be floating, and I have to measure this out, and I have to hold it correctly, and I have to make sure it stays in place, and I have to put all these other threads, so I have to make sure what it's going to look like. Obviously, I don't want to leave all these beads just floating around, because it just kind of looks like a Macarena or whatever, whatever you call it. It's just kind of all over the place, and look, it has to go to something and have a purpose to it, right? So obviously you're not able to tell, because if you look very closely on this one, how close and difficult that really is. It's almost, you got to use like a microscope almost, a magnifying glass to get that. So anyway, so all these threads are supposed to go through there. Obviously, as I talked about earlier, the blue match up with the blue, and then the red. See, like obviously, I don't know if you can see this. You see those are red numbers. Okay, so let's look at this red number here. Oh, like a 195 right here. If you look right over here, so we look for 195. Boom, there's a 195. So this doesn't go to one of the holes already pre-drilled on this piece of wood. This actually goes to a ring at the bottom base of the deck. So that's probably going to be a keeper there. The other ones is probably going to kind of be, I'm going to have to skip a whole bunch of them, because not only I don't have the holes for the thread, I have to make it look realistic. I have to kind of, so that's the only thing I can do, is just for me to go and cut all these and break them down. I've already kind of broken like 2 or 3 of the doubles. The 2 or 3 doubles are so difficult because the holes are so small and the whole bead itself is so small that even when I use a pre-drill, very thin, I can't drill 2 holes in one of these beads. It's just too small. Like, it breaks on you at least 25% of the time. It'll break on you. It just crumbles into wood. So then what happens is that if I get lucky enough to drill 2 holes in one of these pieces of woods, which is just a fraction of a millimeter thicker than this regular single one, then I glue the whole bead itself, the whole pulley, so that it adds strength to the wood, so that whenever I'm actually putting the string in there, it doesn't break on me, or it doesn't break down the road in the future. Because obviously, when you bump in your hands into, or actually bump into the strings will pull on this, and then if it breaks, that's 40 minutes of work. Everything's gone, So anyway, since they ended up messing all this up, like I said, I have to be creative. Since I was not able to do this, it could have been my mistake. I did not possibly understand that the fact that I wasn't able to do that, so then I had to compromise and sort of figure out what I was going to be able to do in order to get this a clean finish. So obviously I've already made mistakes on this as well, but I don't know if they're shooting electronic devices at me or what's going on. But if you look right here, this is actually supposed to be covered, and for some reason I decided to go ahead and give this an opening, and this right here is supposed to be closed off, but because it's supposed to fit in there, and it did, but for some reason along the lines they were shooting the electronic devices into my brain, caused me to make a mistake. So with this particular situation is, like, for an example, this isn't going to have much purpose to it, but if you look very closely, you see this string right here that goes all the way across, and then it ties to this piece of wood, this stem. Well, that really doesn't have a purpose on a boat. On a boat, that does not have a purpose. That is just decoration. That right there is just simply decoration. Makes it look fancy. Makes it look like you can tell that I'm just doing work, or you could tell that I'm just making efforts, and it took a lot of efforts, which is great, and it is decorative, but really doesn't add that much purpose to the ideas that if you were on a real life size boat, like if I was in the movie Peter Pan, with like Robin Williams, right? And you ever seen that movie Hook? you know, where is it Peter Pan? Yeah, he's Peter Pan, and he's with all these kids, and they're all eating off like the Last Supper's Jesus' table, and they're all like eating a Thanksgiving dinner, or it's like a Thanksgiving, and he's the only adult, and they're at a fully empty table, and he says, "Just imagine that you can, imagine that you can." And he imagines, and they get into some sort of imaginary dream state, and then all of a sudden there's the feast of a lifetime that you can imagine on a table. All the turkey legs and all the desserts and all that great stuff. So if you were in something like that, and you just like imagine yourself like you're on this boat, right? And this turned into a life-size boat, and you're sailing across the world, right, with a beautiful girl, right? Beautiful blonde, right? So, and if this items would not be necessary. That's just decorative. That's just to add. That really doesn't add very much to anything. It does look nicer. It does look okay, but it doesn't really add much to it. Doesn't have really purpose to it. It just makes it look like you did more than you're supposed to, and it does, and it doesn't. It is supposed to be decorative, but there's not really a reason for it that's going to give the boat any more effective efficiency to make it do its purpose. It doesn't have a purpose to the boat that makes it function in whatever way that it is. So anyway, that's how those things go. I figured out a few different others about the stems that I'll be having to add on these, where it's supposed to give rotation. So if the wind was blowing this way, and it was blowing, so obviously if the wind was blowing this way, you would have to have the veils, and it would be catching the wind. But in that sense, this is what the strings are supposed to do. You know, they're supposed to do. So anyway, I thought I'd kind of give a discussion. There's so much more. I'm still learning on this. I kind of learn it by boat. But I think, in my opinion, as complex and detailed it is, they did this on purpose. They could have built the sections. There's different sections inside this internally. And there's sections. And they broke up as dividers, because I used to never understand how can you build a curve without having to. How can you build something like that and hold it together, right? How can you hold this and have a curve? So really, it's because there's sections, and you smooth it down and you slowly staple piece by piece until it forms this sort of round curve stable of a boat in measurements. So that's just kind of what's going on with this. And obviously this looks a little fancy thread. And one mistake I also did with this already is okay, so I thought I put this reverse. I thought I did this, so I got this right. Yeah. I thought I did this reverse. In fact, I thought I did probably switch this item out too. I think they did. Yeah, they did. Because I looked at this veil and actually put this veil on backwards. So anyway, yeah, that's how it goes, and there's some other threads that go into this. But this turned out great. I couldn't believe I got this actually correctly pointed on there. I mean, it was snug. I mean, I put that on there, and I have to pre-drill a hole. I have to stretch, widen it out with the pre-drill, so it gives a beautiful, nice snug. So, like, obviously, you don't want too much, but it gives a nice, beautiful snug. Just perfect. Now, for those that are even more professional, I don't know if you can see, it's very placed on there very, very, very well. But look, can you tell that one side has just a little bit more to it, you can. Just look, and that's about a millimeter an inch. So you look right there, if you can see that. Can you tell now? Just a little bit, but it's nearly almost perfect. So it fits on there. Then you're gonna have to put thread in there, and some of the ideas as well that I think would be really great if they added to these boats is, well, the reason they probably don't show it is because you can't look at the internal part of it. To what's going on here because it's covered up. Once it's glued, it's there, it's locked in forever. But the idea of it, that when you make these threads to the bottom that lead into the internal of the ship, it gives an idea that there's some sort of rope that harnesses to pull the anchors and to go fishing and to do all these things that they need to do, whatever, exploring the sea, the bottoms of the sea and whatnot. But you just put a thread in there and you really can't see anything. And that's the thing about the Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman, it actually gives you the ability, and there's actually an entire side of the ship that's been broken into a piece so that you can look into the internal of what the ship would be like, and the different sailors or the different pirates, the people, building the cannons, the ammunition, the foods, and all that other stuff. And you'll see those sort of ropes and threads that go around as you hear the Vikings go boom, 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 boom. You ever see it in the movies where they play these drums and it's sort of like slave music, and they have these these Vikings and these and they get these, and that's how they get them to work. Well, that's sort of, or you ever seen how they're rotating a pivoting axle that's pivoted into the ship, and they have like 5 guys. You ever seen the movie The Conan the Barbarian, where there's a stick in front of them and they're all pushing and they're rotating this really heavy item? Well, that's exactly what it's doing, because it's pulling the rope and it's pulling different items, either luggage or storage or whatever it may be, or the anchor itself from the bottom of the ship to the actual men that are actually doing it. So and the Flying Dutchman gives you kind of a little bit a sense of that. It's one of the other ships that I really wanted to build, is that there's only a piece, a section of this boat that you only make, and I think it's called the Trinidad, where in this piece of boat, it's basically cut right down where you only get a slice, and in this slice, Trinidad, I can't remember how it's pronounced, the second word, like Seminasta, but it's a Trinidad. It comes from Trinidad or some shit, or something like that. But it's this Trinidad. It's from Orca, several, and and basically the entire ship has been cut into a half, like if it was a real deal. And you can look at all 3 layers, like they're 3-story or 2-3 stories, 4 stories of each layer of the boat, where you have the storage, where they place the cannons, where they place food items, all these different things, the cannons and all the functions of a ship, so you get an idea of what's going on inside the ship. But anyway, that's like probably one of the other boats I really want to build. It's not a full boat, but it gives you the idea, because nobody really knows. It's great to see the outside, but you really don't know what's going on inside. So anyway, that's what hopefully I'll get the chance to do one day soon before I leave here. I don't know. I don't think it'll be here. It might be, because I have so many other projects and I don't have too much time left in my contract during the year that I'm here. And I don't think I'll be able. I don't know if they're going to give me an apartment in Dallas. I don't think they are. I'm going to have so much trouble, so I'm probably going to leave here, and I might end up staying. If I do, then I'm going to leave early, breaking the contract, and let them keep the money anyway, even after I re-sign the contract, and stay another 6 months. But that's the plan, and that's kind of what's going on. So. A lot of the times when I'm building these as well, the stem, I don't even want to touch these a lot of the times, because the more I do, the more it breaks, the more it wears off. The more it moves like this, the more chances it is whenever it's time for me to go ahead and add these strings like I'm supposed to, it's not going to be able to. Because I'll start playing with it, a little bit, and then a hole gets in there, and then it just shatters on me, and then I have to redo it. Not only I have to refix it, I have to get the thread, I have to get the bead, the pulley. I had to fix the pulley on a table, and I have to wrap it around and make it look like it's a knot about it's a knot about, you know, right above the pulley. Once the pulley is completed, I have to wrap it around in the same area where it broke off to sort of help cover up the idea that it broke off, so it still looks authentic. It's a quick repair, but it takes me like 30 minutes just for that, you know. So obviously I have this function here. This is a metal stem that goes to the very bottom, and this stem here at the bottom is actually supposed to be a rope and a thread that goes from this hole to this, and then I'm going to have to put new ring holes on here, and there's no really purpose to that I've ever known on a boat that does that for. But obviously, if I were to build one of these, complex boats, like the not elite yet, but like the hard difficulty, the reality of that boat is much more authentic. It gives the idea of that boat. It gives the more idea of that boat being more purposeful, and how whoever makes up these drawings, or whoever draws and maps out the directions for customers. So when they're building these for customers, however they gauge difficultiness is how much time it takes you, the tedious work, and then a preference, overall judgment from the creator. And from there, they can gauge it and say, okay, this is going to take you 120 hours, this is going to take you 140 hours. But those are really rough estimates. The 120 hours is with a professional that was going through the systems. It's always, for me, this is easily took me 200 hours, if not more. Easily took me 200 hours, if not more. And that's still with mistakes. So, anyway, this is kind of what's going on with this. And obviously, I don't like for it to do that, but you have these little welts sometimes. And it's not a complete smooth finish, but it's where the nails ended up where it just stuck out too much, which I don't think I've had it that bad ever. So you can see sort of welts, but you sort of kind of get the use to it, understanding how to put a strips, and then where you have to stop, so that then you have to start at the bottom, and then where to stop, so that you start splicing somewhere between the middle. And the measurements of each millimeter that your stripe goes off it's going to measure your difficultness when you get to the middle. So, obviously, I don't have the best tools. I don't have, there's a lot of methods I don't use. Like, for an example, in this type of boat, you see this side fenders. They actually come already pre-made and cut for you. You just have to cut them out of the little puzzle. So once you do that, you sand it down. I put these strips, these planking strips, these white strips, just like this. But the thing is that this has to have curve. This has to have a curve to it, and the wood is not built and can't really sustain that much curve for a long period of time, or too much curve, and it just breaks like it did right there. So the method is to use an iron, use a heated iron, and dip this in water, and then give it a curve so it doesn't break, and it does give you the curve that you need. But the idea of it is that I already put these white plankings on the side, and there's glue in the middle of it. So I didn't want to use the iron, and I didn't want to dip it. I can't dip it in water anymore because I don't know what the effects are, because I could be making things even worse. But regardless, I can't just dip it in water and expect it curve, because one side is already covered and it's already been in glue. So what I'm going to do is I just decided to not use it at all and see if I could. So that's why it broke on me. That's why it cracked, but I did a pretty good repair to this, and that's kind of what's going on with that. But you're supposed to use, I've seen them I use an iron, but it's the same thing. It's like a curling iron that girls use, something similar like that, where the heat creates a curl, so that you, and the wood, once it's moist, it gives bend. When you get water, you're able to get a sort of a bend, and you can get this sole part of this. You get this whole part of this to get the curve, but it still takes a while because I haven't even perfected that. I tried that a couple of times and it did drastically help, but I didn't know that you're supposed to actually dip in water, and I didn't do it with this. And this is, even without these plankings on here, it's very difficult. So when I put these plankings, it was going to probably be about twice as difficult. So I had to do with what I had. So anyway, we're gonna finish this up, and now I'm gonna go ahead and wait till it glues, dries up. Go ahead and add this rotation fender to this, and right here, see. So I'm gonna have to, obviously you can see it's sticking out too much. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to sand this down, and sand this down a little bit more. That looks like about a quarter of it, not even a quarter of an inch, about 4 millimeters, 3 millimeters. And I have to figure out how I'm going to be able to sand that down, give it a nice smooth touch, add some glue to this, add some more planking to give it a nice look to it, because it kind of looks kind of rigged and ghetto right there a little bit. So, you know, we're going to add some decoration to that. But if you look real close, once this closes and I put the nails in like that, I don't know if you can see that. When I put these nails in, I have to pre-drill them, and then I put the nails in there, and then I glue it again. So it'll give this strap look to it, like it's on there. And you'll have something like that. The idea is that it pivots like that when it's under the water, like that. So, but it doesn't. So anyway, I'm gonna have to figure all this out, and you know, obviously this is still gluing. I don't want to mess this up, so I'm gonna let this dry overnight, and gonna do some more work. The entire top deck and all this is an entire separate, but the strings is like the strings and the threads. That's a whole. It's like building the whole boat all over again, because you're just started. So that's kind of what's going on. This is my slow progress. I should have already completed this, but yeah, that's kind of what's going on. You know, I still get very familiar as well is the quality of the company. I've only built Amati and Orca. There's also Latina. There's also Blue Jacket. Blue Jacket is supposed to be the most expensive in quality, but I don't really like some of the instructions on some of the other ones. I think Orca did a pretty good job. Amati did a pretty good job. And I haven't tried the other ones. It's just that when I build them and they make them very some of them you have to read more than look at a picture, and it's kind of hard to understand something when you're trying to read something that you're trying to actually physically display, and what it's trying to explain, because those are somebody else's interpretations of what they think you should do with what you're doing, with what material they give you. So, and this idea is, I'll probably eventually will start off with some other beginners, but all of them I built Orca out of, I think it was all out of Orca, and so it's Orca and yeah, so that's Orca and Amati. Amati's Italian, Orca's from Spain. Blue Jacket is supposed to be like the most expensive, really high dollar. And then there's supposed to be some other makers. There's supposed to be some other makers. A couple of other ones that I've heard of, but give or take, the instructions are not all the same. You look, they give explanations a little bit different. Obviously, that's the different scales of pricing. But Okri, that's what it's called. Okri is supposed to be it's decent. It's pretty good. But anyway, that's just kind of what's going on, and yeah, that'll be that. So this is kind of what the progress is, and still got, you know, top deck where I'm going to add these items. I still got to build a lot of these small pieces that how I'm going to figure out is a whole step on itself, all over again. Got to figure all this out.